Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the person staring back at you in the mirror is only a carefully curated masca reflection shaped by fear, expectation, and convenience. Beneath that mask lies a shadow you've spent a lifetime avoiding, the aspects of yourself you deem unacceptable, unworthy, or dangerous. What if the very traits you suppress, deny, or despise are the ones holding the key to your most profound growth? What if your discomfort, your recurring mistakes, your deepest frustrations are not enemies to be vanquished, but signals from your own psyche pointing toward a truth you've refused to acknowledge? The paradox is unavoidable. We live in a world that praises self-improvement, that urges us to be better versions of ourselves, yet it rarely teaches us how to confront what is already within. How do you embrace what terrifies you about yourself without losing your sense of identity? Can light exist without darkness, or is the shadow an inseparable companion to consciousness, silently guiding, warning, and shaping us from behind the scenes? As you ponder this, consider the patterns that have haunted your life, the moments of self-sabotage, the impulses you try to suppress, the feelings of guilt, envy, or rage you swore you would never admit. Are they merely flaws, or are they echoes of a hidden self waiting for recognition? Carl Jung called this hidden self the shadow, an integral but often rejected part of the psyche. And he argued that the journey toward wholeness begins not by erasing the shadow, but by confronting it, naming it, and integrating it. Yet integration, the shadow, is not a modern invention, nor is it a mere curiosity of psychotherapy. Is an ancient, persistent force within every human psyche. Carl Jung described it as the part of ourselves we deny, repress, or project onto the world. It is the repository of instincts, impulses, and desires that society deems unacceptable, that morality condemns, and that our ego fears. And yet, the shadow is not evil in itself. It is simply unlived potential, a hidden vitality that, when ignored, manifests in unexpected ways: anger, self-sabotage, envy, or compulsive repetition of mistakes. Why do we hide from it? The answer lies at the intersection of psychology, philosophy, and culture. From a psychological standpoint, the mind is an adaptive system. It erects barriers to shield us from feelings that threaten our sense of stability. Nietzsche wrote of humans as creatures of habit, craving comfort and fearing disruption. The ego, in its pursuit of coherence, draws a line around behaviors and desires it cannot integrate, banishing them to the unconscious. Jung saw this not as failure, but as a necessary survival mechanism in early life. A child must conform to parental rules, social norms, and the expectation of safety, suppressing anything that could provoke rejection or harm. Yet, the consequences of suppression are profound. When desires, impulses, or truths are buried, they do not vanish, they fester, influence, and shape behavior indirectly. Schopenhauer called human suffering the product of unfulfilled desire. Jung reframed it as the suffering that arises from our refusal to acknowledge the whole of ourselves. Society, in turn, reinforces this repression. Cultural narratives prize the idealized self, the virtuous, successful, and composed individual. Anything that deviates from this norm is labeled unacceptable. Guilt, shame, and fear become powerful chains, conditioning us to turn away from our own instincts and inner truths. Philosophically, The shadow represents the tension between being and becoming. Huxley warned that humans often live in a state of psychic anesthesia, numbing themselves to uncomfortable realities. We are taught to admire control, discipline, and rationality. Yet these very virtues can blind us to the depths of our own psyche. The shadow lurks behind the polished mask, whispering truths that are at odds with conscious ideals. By denying it, we are not merely avoiding discomfort. We are fragmenting. The shadow does not simply linger quietly in the recesses of the mind. It shapes the very architecture of your life, often without your conscious awareness. Imagine a river flowing beneath a frozen landscape. On the surface, everything seems still, controlled, and serene. But beneath, currents surge, carving patterns, shifting obstacles, and carrying debris. This is the way the shadow operates. Subtle, hidden, yet profoundly transformative. Every suppressed desire, every denied impulse, every feeling you refuse to acknowledge leaves its mark. You may notice it in repeated mistakes, in the relationships that falter, in opportunities you unconsciously sabotage. Cognitive science reveals how the unconscious mind governs behavior, biases, heuristics, and ingrained patterns drive decision-making far more than deliberate thought. Jung's shadow is not merely metaphorical. When you refuse to confront it, it manifests indirectly through envy when you resent another's success, through rage when trivial frustrations explode into disproportionate reactions, through procrastination when fear of failure paralyzes action. Society compounds this effect. Cultural conditioning trains us to admire the polished persona, the composed mask, the neatly packaged life. When your shadow surfaces, you are told to hide it, to suppress it further, or to feel ashamed. Over time, this creates a cycle of repression and projection. You begin to see in others the very traits you deny in yourself. Irritations, judgments, and resentments accumulate, painting the world with shadows of your inner conflict. Sartre might call this bad faith, a life lived in denial, where freedom exists only as a concept, not as a lived reality. The consequences extend beyond the individual. Families, workplaces, and communities are subtly shaped by collective shadows. Unacknowledged biases perpetuate discrimination, unprocessed anger fuels conflict, and societal taboos push entire truths into hiding. Even creativity and innovation are stunted, because true originality requires confronting uncomfortable thoughts and emotions. Your shadow, when ignored, is a silent architect of stagnation and suffering, and the emotional cost is immense. Anxiety, depression, and a persistent sense of incompleteness are common symptoms of this unconscious tension. Viktor Frankl observed that when life feels devoid of meaning, it is often because individuals have failed to reconcile with the fullness of their being. The shadow, when left unattended, ensures that even moments of apparent success or joy carry a subtle, invisible weight. You are living a double life, one self in public, another in secret, each shaping and constraining the other. The paradox is stark. The very fears that keep us from exploring the shadow are the same forces that maintain its control. Each avoidance reinforces the cage, while each confrontation threatens liberation. And yet, within this hidden web lies confronting the shadow is not a gentle endeavor, is a rebellion against the parts of yourself you have been taught to fear. Imagine standing before a locked door, behind which lies not a monster, but a mirror. You do not know what is waiting for you. A flicker of anger, a fragment of shame, a desire you thought impossible. The instinct is to retreat, to preserve the illusion of safety. Yet, true liberation begins the moment you reach for the key. Historically, the bravest acts of the human spirit have been those that face the unacknowledged. Carl Jung himself insisted that the shadow must be confronted consciously. He argued that the psyche is incomplete until these disowned parts are recognized and integrated. Thinkers like Nietzsche proposed the necessity of embracing life's darkness to achieve personal transcendence. To rebel against the shadow is to reclaim authorship over your own narrative. It is to refuse the passive drift dictated by unconscious impulses. Practical steps emerge not through abstraction, but through deliberate, often uncomfortable action. Begin with observation. Journal your reactions. Notice recurring patterns, and reflect on the triggers that provoke intense emotion. These reactions are the fingerprints of your shadow. Do not judge them. Treat them as data from your inner world. Then comes confrontation. Actively explore the desires, fears, or impulses you habitually deny. Meditation, art, therapy, or introspective dialogue can illuminate aspects of the self that have been hiding in plain sight. Yet, integration requires more than acknowledgement. You must experiment with expression. Perhaps you have a tendency toward anger, masked as politeness or suppression. Find a safe space to channel it constructively. Perhaps envy has guided subtle choices. Study the impulse, understand its source, and redirect its energy toward growth rather than resentment. Viktor Frankl's insights remind us that meaning emerges not from avoidance, but from action, even in the face of internal chaos. Each conscious act is a rebellion against unconscious control, a reclaiming of your inner sovereignty. The rebellion is not painless. Confrontation can provoke temporary disorientation, discomfort, or even fear that you are unraveling. This is necessary. It is the shaking of the cage, the cracking of illusions that have kept you confined. Over time, however, a new equilibrium forms a self, not divided, but reconciled. The shadow transforms from a tyrant into a guide, revealing depths of creativity, courage, and empathy previously inaccessible. Integration also affects relationships and society. Projection diminishes, empathy increases, and your interactions become richer, more authentic. You cease using others as mirrors for your unacknowledged parts. You inhabit your freedom fully. At the heart of this journey lies a revelation so profound that it dissolves fear, shame, and hesitation. The shadow is not your enemy, is your hidden truth, your unclaimed power, the unmined gold of your psyche. Imagine, for a moment, that every impulse you once rejected, every part of yourself you deemed dark or dangerous, was a doorway to a deeper understanding of life and self. The terror you felt was not punishment, but the threshold of awakening. In confronting the shadow, you discover that what you feared in others, the deceit, the cruelty, the envy, the weakness, exists first within yourself. Yet, this is not a condemnation. It is an invitation to wholeness. Jung described this integration as the process of individuation, the emergence of a self that is no longer fragmented, that embraces its totality without delusion or repression. You realize that darkness is simply another shade of light, a necessary counterpoint that gives meaning to clarity, courage to strength, and depth to joy. Consider the paradox. The more you resist the shadow, the more it shapes you unconsciously. The more you embrace it, the more you are free. This is the ultimate rebellion, not against others, not against circumstance, but against the tyranny of unacknowledged self. The cage that once confined you was built from fear, shame, and desire. Fear of judgment, shame for imperfection, desire for control. Now the bars dissolve. You are standing in the vast openness of your own psyche, fully seen and fully empowered. This realization carries with it a moral and existential weight. To live with your shadow fully integrated is to act in the world with authenticity, courage, and compassion. You no longer project blame, manipulate through hidden motives, or live in constant avoidance. Instead, your choices reflect a conscious alignment with your values, your desires, and your deepest truths. Frankl would argue that in such alignment lies meaning. Nietzsche, that in such alignment lies life's creative affirmation. Jung, that in such alignment lies the self's completeness. The cinematic truth of this moment is almost unbearable in its clarity. You perceive the intricate tapestry of your life, the mistakes, the betrayals, the moments of cowardice and courage, and recognize that each was necessary. Each was part of the weaving of your being. Shadows and light are inseparable. One cannot exist without the other. To reject the darkness is to remain half blind. To embrace it is to see fully. And so, the final truth, freedom is not external. Power is not dominion over others. Happiness is not the absence of suffering. True mastery, true liberation emerges from within, from the fearless acknowledgement of the totality of yourself. The soul that once quivered before its own reflection now stands resolute, aware, and alive. It is no longer a prisoner, but an architect. Take a breath and let the weight of this realization settle. The shadows you once feared are now your teachers. The depths you once avoided are now your foundation. You are whole. You are free. And for the first time, the world appears not as a threat, but as a mirror reflecting the vast, luminous, and paradoxical truth of your own being.